Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's great to have you here again. We're looking forward to a great and lively discussion today. We have with us Dr. J.C. Gregory and also Dr. Matt Bergman is here because he is a new senior fellow with CPE. And we're going to talk more about that here in just a moment. Our discussion will be led by Dr. Gregory, and he's going to be talking about adult education and how we can make that bridge to college and career readiness. So looking forward to that. It's great to have everyone here. If you would please, in the chat, just put your name and your organization, your title, so that way we can have that recorded in our history. Last time we got together, our meeting was about re-enrollment. Want to give folks a chance to talk about that. If there have been some things that they took away from that meeting that they've been able to capitalize on. So if you have something that you've done, please, in relationship to our last meeting, please come off mic or turn your mic on and share with us. Moving along, let's talk about Dr. Bergman. Dr. Bergman, welcome, Matt, to our small group here at CPE as a senior fellow. Dr. Bergman's going to be working in the area of adult learners and in transfer. Matt, what do you got to say? What are you thinking?
So I just appreciate having the opportunity to join CPE in this advisory capacity as a senior fellow. I've worked with the University of Louisville for 18 years now. I am now a partner faculty after being an associate professor for many, many years. And I have moved on to some consulting work as well as this wonderful work with CPE. So I'm excited about the possibility of scaling a lot of what we are doing statewide to institutions to make efficient pathways for both working learners and those that are traditional but transferring.
Well, it's great to have you on the team. You and I go back a long time, and it's always fun to work with you. You and Dr. Kendra Winters Pearson recently did a book chapter. Can you talk a little bit about that?
So a recent book is being published. The editors are out of Australia, but they wanted to publish a book about college student engagement and wanted a lens from the adult perspective. And specifically, we focused our book chapter on best practices from 4 institutions, including the University of Memphis, Kentucky Community and Technical College System, Penn State, and the University of Louisville, talking about the CPL practices by which we operate and some of the things that we've had successes and some of the pitfalls that we've shared to hopefully advance the practitioners within both the national scale, but also internationally to get some additional attention on the CPL practices that were working well in the States.
Fantastic. You know, there's just so much you're going to bring to our discussions here, so we look forward to it. Today, though, we've got with us Dr. J.C. Gregory or Dr. John Gregory. And J.C., you corrected me the other day that nobody knows you by John Gregory, right? So I'm hoping it's okay that we're going by J.C. Here today. So Dr. Gregory is the executive director for the Kentucky Adult Education Department. Prior to that, he was a faculty member, and you were at K-State doing the ROTC when you and I first met. So you bring so much as a retired lieutenant colonel from the U.S. Army, and then being at K-State, working within that system to this community. So, JC, I want to turn it over to you and share what you're thinking about and where you want to go.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Dallas. It's indeed a pleasure to be here today. Before we start this short discussion, I want to kind of shape the conversation. So when you think about adult education, particularly now, I am not a native of this fine state and this Commonwealth of Kentucky, but just through the powers of discernment, I guess you could say, when people oftentimes think of adult education in Kentucky, they think of the GED people. And so GED is a fraction, a component, a percentage of what we do, but it's not the totality of the things that we do. So to shape the conversation, I want to start with a statutory basis. So this is a federal program, and what the federal statute reads is that we are to assist adults working age in the attainment of a secondary school diploma and in the transition to post-secondary education and training. So our job, a statutory mandate, is to facilitate and transition working age Kentuckians onto a college campus in some shape, form, or fashion. Now, when we think about that and when we break that down, we are speaking in terms of working age. So working means that these fine folks bring skills, and in some cases, professional skills to the process. And we want to do everything that we can to aid them in their transition, not just to a job, but to a career. So I think we all know, but I recognize that there's plenty of fine folks that are listening. That requires a few things, particularly in 2024, as we transition and move into 2025 very quickly. That requires so education and training from a lifelong continuum process. So how do you get that done? So there are some people, or very few, based on what I have come to recognize, who can do this on their own. But most of us have to go to a college campus in some shape, form, or fashion to get and to make this process happen. So what does that mean to this audience? That means that when we use this term, a adult, when we're speaking in the space of a college campus, I think sometimes the individuals that come through the process that we deal with get left out, because there may be some type of stigma, there may be some type of consciousness as to folks that could not complete the traditional secondary process, that maybe they may not be quite ready for the college experience. And I beg to differ. So we deal with some individuals that are multi-talented, very skilled. They just like many of us, were impacted by life, and that was going through the secondary process. So many of them have been out of the classroom environment for many years. But think about this. So think about the resolve that it takes if someone has been outside of that environment for 5, 10, 15, and 20 years to come back and to gain that momentum. So what we want to do is to leverage and to maximize that momentum, because what we are talking about is the transition piece. The transition, once they clear the one hurdle of the secondary process, then we want them to be able to matriculate into the post-secondary process. So how does that help you? That means that the pool is actually larger. So you have a larger spectrum of folks to pull from. And these are folks that are ready for the college experience. And if they are not quite ready, then we can do that as well. We can take them through the bridging or the gateway system and that process. And we can be, from a co-instructional standpoint, a partner with you all who are still on college campuses, to be able to get them to a place where, number one, they are ready. And number two, we know that the value of this is in the completion. And there are a multitude of variables that go into completing this process. Some are inside of the classroom, many are outside of the classroom. And that's the value that we bring to, which is we focus on, from a barrier standpoint, what are those barriers that are preventing so folks from moving forward and from completing this process. So we bring a lot of value, I think, to this table and to this process. And what I want you to consider and to think about is that the population that we serve, it is a multifaceted population. This includes veterans, their families. This includes folks across all age demographics. So, but if you break down the subpopulation that we serve, so taking people through the GED process, 75% of the individuals that we serve are 38 years old or less, and the median is 29. So we are still dealing with a relatively young subpopulation, and that is a population, I believe, that is ripe for continuation into the post-secondary space. So my intent is multifaceted. So number one is to bring some visibility as to what this thing actually is. So adult education, from a statutory standpoint, is a program that equips Kentuckians in the Commonwealth with the skills necessary for employment and self-sufficiency. And I think we all can recognize that one of the best ways of doing that is through the educational process. And the more of that you have, it's more likely that you will be more self-sufficient and you can make some vertical advancement as far as this ladder of life is concerned.
JC, can I ask
Yes,
can I ask
sir.
a question here, or
Sure.
make an observation? You know, when you talk about that median age being 29 years old, that kind of breaks a paradigm for me. I really thought folks that were involved in the GED process would be younger. So I think that speaks to exactly what we're looking at in the way of adult learners.
Yes, sir.
Colleges. Can you
Yes.
speak to that a little bit more? I mean, that's a great point to me.
Yeah. So life is such that the impact still runs along the time continuum. And many folks just are not able to get back into the process in quote unquote a timely manner. Yes, we do serve younger folks. The second largest group that we do serve fits right in between 20 and 24. So they are relatively young. But from a median standpoint, it goes a little higher up that scale. And something else that needs to be recognized is from a fluency standpoint, as far as the virtual process. The longer that an individual has been outside of the classroom, the more unlikely that it is that they have the skills required to be able to navigate in the classroom of 2024. Like I still teach at the University of, I still teach at U of L, and it just amazes me at some of the traditional students that have challenges in the Blackboard space. So think about somebody that is 25, 30, 35, 40, and 45. That can be somewhat of a challenge and a barrier. And that's where the Office of Adult Education comes in. And we can mitigate those barriers because we can set the conditions for them to be prepped and primed and ready to move into that space. And that will be one less thing that they will have to deal with as they have to navigate through all of the other things that may be new as far as an experience to them. But yeah, so this is just from a visibility standpoint, just from a, just from a awareness standpoint that there is another subpopulation that is ready to transition, and we certainly want to be a part of the process to mitigate some of these barriers. And I think that we're primed and ready to do that. And so most importantly, we try to make it a habit to try to partner with folks that have the subject matter expertise, which is why we have partnered with CPE. And so we have a new partnership that is rooted in the student basic needs process, whereby we go through the process of trying to identify some of these basic needs that will allow students to set the conditions to be successful in the classroom by mitigating some of these outside of the classroom factors. And I think, we all know what those are. If we're talking about working age people, we're speaking in terms of childcare, we're speaking in terms of the transportation and things of that nature. So this is grown folks' business. So you have to think in that spectrum and dealing with the challenges of life. So we want to get into that business because that is where we may be able to have some impact on the success and the completion of this process, so they can be able to make some vertical advancement as they go through this, educational journey.
Yeah, that's a great point, and making that linkage with student basic needs and the work we're trying to accomplish there, it's just a force multiplier.
Yes, sir. So, but that is essentially the 101 of what we do. But please know that there is a conjunctive that and after attaining that secondary school diploma and in the transition to post-secondary education. That is a part of the federal mandate. That is actually what we are supposed to do. That's not something new. That's not something special. That's not something that is extraordinary. That is the process. That is exactly what it looks like in totality. And, that may require somewhat of a cultural change, a different mindset, a different level of consciousness, but that actually is what the program is. It's not just the secondary process. It is a transition into the college space and all of the things in between that fit into that spectrum of transition. Because we want these individuals to land on a college campus with as many tools in their toolbox as possible. So they can use multiple tools, whether it's a hammer, it's a pair of pliers, it's a screwdriver. I've heard something said that if the only tool that you have is a hammer, then all things become a nail. And you don't have the level of dexterity that is required to navigate in and out of situations because you only have one tool. So the goal here is for them to have multiple tools once they leave the secondary process to be able to navigate themselves through this post-secondary process. So that is in a nutshell kind of what we do. So I'll take any types of questions or concerns that you may have with respect to that before I move on.
So with questions, you can raise your hand or just turn your mic on, and that'll move you up the list, and we'll recognize you and let you pose those questions.
So yeah, I have a question.
Sure, Shelley, go ahead.
Yes, I'm Shelley, and I'm with Engage Kentucky, and we're an AmeriCorps program. We're one of 24 in the state. And I'm curious if our AmeriCorps programs can be of assistance to those that you're serving. Because at the end of every AmeriCorps completed, every member that completes the program, they get an educational award that can help pay for college or post-secondary education. And I know in my experience, sometimes folks I got in some trouble with financial aid, and this might be a way to remove that barrier while they're gaining experience, networking, building their resume, all of that. So we would certainly be willing to help with that.
Absolutely. So absolutely, that is a significant component. There is an affordability piece to college, as we all know. And that is a significant barrier. I thought I heard that Miss Susan Hopkins was on the line. She's one of the fine staff members here. So once again, we are in the barrier business, and that is one of the barriers. And we welcome the opportunity to be able to partner with you, because that's a significant component of what we're trying to mitigate. Because a lot of the individuals that we deal with, they have the skills and the knowledge to transition, but they don't believe that they have the resources. And some of that is not having a level of consciousness as to where to find the resources. So we certainly welcome the opportunity to partner, because that is something that is sorely needed in the space, working with the subpopulation that we work with on a daily basis.
So JC, David has got his hand up, and Susan, I think, is with him.
Oh, yeah.
These are your team members. If you guys would introduce yourselves.
Hi all, I'm David Potter. I work in the Office of Adult Education. I'm the Education Transition Strategist.
And hi, I'm Susan Hopkins. I'm oversee the College and Career Navigators for the Office of Adult Education. And as Dr. Gregory said, we spend a lot of effort with our College and Career Navigators, letting them know what resources there are, connecting them to community resources, and particularly in the area of student financial aid. So whether it's a KIA outreach counselor, or it's a AmeriCorps college coach, or it's somebody at one of the post-secondary institutions, we do try to do that warm handoff so that they do have help doing the application, the admission application, doing the FAFSA, all those kind of things.
And I just wanted to add, Shelley, that if you would put your contact information in the chat, I'll send you a follow-up email and we can talk details about how we might be able to collaborate moving forward.
Yeah, that would be perfect, because we would not only love for you guys to refer them to our college coaches, but they could be a college coach or a Vista member, so they can get those experience. To me, that's what would be really helpful for them in that aspect. And then the other part is, like, we also do like holistic care with our members. So if they're running into barriers, we're helping support them, which adds an additional layer of supports. But yeah, thank you.
Great, great. And you know, JC, whenever I was doing some background looking into your website and such like that, you guys are represented in every county in the Commonwealth.
Yes, sir. So we cover all 120 counties. We're set up on a local provider network. So we have 26 local folks out here that are actually doing the heavy lifting. I think so one of them is on the line with Dr. Johnson. And we have approximately 90 adult education centers across the 120 counties, but we cover down on all 120 counties across the Commonwealth. And we're trying to expand as much as possible. So we have all 120 counties covered. The local, so network is made up of 14 of the TCS, 16 colleges. We have about 5 or 6 school districts. We have some consortiums, and we have one pure nonprofit We kind of cover the gamut of the process across the Commonwealth of Kentucky. One of the other things that we do, and something else that's actually baked into the cake, is language learning. That is one of the core components of this process. And that's a pool as well. But if you break this down, so some individuals that come into the Commonwealth from outside the continental US, they have already been to college and done all types of wonderful things, but it's not necessarily recognized in this country. So a way sometimes is that we can take them through the GED process, which we hope will be a pretty quick kind of process for them. And in order for them to be recognized, to be able to do some of the things that they want to do in this country, then they too may have to transition into the post-secondary space. I mean, it may or may not make sense, but it may be the only prudent thing in real time. And that's an opportunity as well.
Sure. Yeah, I see a big opportunity there because immigrants can be stop-out students, just as we have here in the U.S. People who were in a college in their home country, but yet they stopped out, moved to the U.S., and they still need to return. So by achieving the language, overcoming the language barrier, then they become great opportunities or resource or connections for us to bring them into higher ed to finish a degree in their area of specialty and expand that out. And I would assume, Susan, that your career and college navigators can help make that transition or to help them see the connection there. Would that be a fair statement?
Yes, sir. They do work with that. They also work with a number of students who may actually already have a certification or a degree in their home country, but because they come here, maybe the standards are different or those those credits don't seamlessly transfer. And so that is one thing that they can do as well, is try to help students mitigate that, because that's a large barrier. We see a number of folks who maybe, served as a nurse or a doctor or a highly educated person in their country, but they come here and they basically are being told they have to start from scratch. So we try to help mitigate that as well, and our college and career navigators have those contacts to help do that.
And I just wanted to add that, a lot of this conversation has been around the sort of applicant pool that adult education can provide for post-secondary institutions, which is a great way to think about it. But there is another wrinkle to the story, which is where adult education can provide support for students who are already in post-secondary education. And I think thinking about English language learners is a really prime example of this, because I know for a fact that there are several post-secondary institutions which have lower levels of support for English language learners. And so adult education can come in and provide free support to those students as they're taking classes.
Yes, and so that's a very good point. So this is at no cost. So all of the services and the activities that are conducted by the local provider network are at no cost. They are at no cost. So we certainly can be value added across a multitude of different spectrums, and so most specifically as far as the language learning process.
Right. So can you help us a little bit to understand maybe more? Maybe it's me, I don't have the knowledge. Maybe the rest of our members in the group have this knowledge, but that college and career navigator, how do you see that relationship building with a potential student coming to you saying, hey, I need to either finish my GED or I need some language skills? How does that relationship build out?
Well, that is the way that it is set up from a conceptual standpoint. Is the navigators are one of, if not the first person that they come into contact with. and they make that personal relationship, and they go through this personal plan with each learner and say, hey, look, this is where you are, and this is where you think you want to be, and let's try to fill in those things that are in between. And in the midst of doing all that, then you identify maybe some of the barriers that we have talked about, but more importantly, where they want to go. If they want to be a horse trainer, if they want to be a welder, if they want to be a school teacher, there are a multitude of different components embedded within that, and that's where the navigator comes in. And the intent from a conceptual standpoint is for them to take them from the beginning all the way through the transition point and beyond, because that's where I think we can really maximize and we can leverage that value, because as they transition, quote unquote, out of a adult education, we still are invested in them. But number one, because we get graded by the feds as to how they do when they exit. So that's important. And two, it's for them and the things that they have dreamed about doing, and we want to be a component of realizing those dreams, and we want to be that positive variable, that piece of the puzzle that is contributing to that lifelong success. So that's a big piece of it, but Susan definitely can probably give some greater context because she works in that space each and every day, and she does a wonderful job with shepherding and with leading that program.
Susan, you've been put on the spot.
That's right. Well, thank you, Dr. Gregory. And so, as he said, we really do. We're the first people that the student meets, either in terms of at intake or at orientation. And so we talk first to the students about, number one, what is their goal? And so their goal might not necessarily be what we think their goal is or should be. But we start with where the student is and what their goal is. We do talk to them about those barriers that would help them from being able to attend class or concentrate, if they're homeless, if they're food insecure, if they don't have clothing, if they don't have childcare. All of those things kind of have to be taken care of before they can even begin to think about studying and taking the classes and testing and those sorts of things if they're going to be successful. So our navigators really build a community of a network of community partners that they can refer students to if they have certain the specific barriers that they need. Then we spend quite a bit of time talking with students about goal setting. And we talk about SMART goals, and we talk about what might be a barrier. Let's have a plan in place if something were to get in the way of your goal. Then we do some career exploration. We do interest inventories. We use Kentucky KY Stats information to see what jobs are available in their area. We talk to them about internships. We talk to them about apprenticeships. All those sorts of things. And then, as Dr. Gregory mentioned, we do help them with that transition. We want to make sure that they're connected with the person that's going to help shepherd them into that next phase. If it's the admissions counselor, if it's a financial aid person. And so we do kind of take them from the moment they walk in the door until they transition, whatever their goal was. And a lot of times their goal changes also. They might think that and I hate to say it this way, but they might think they can only do one thing. But after working with the college and career navigator and talking about, they do a little bit of a personal SWOT analysis kind of a thing, that maybe they see that they do have some transferable skills, or maybe they're interested in a career that they hadn't thought about before. And that's part of what our navigators can do as well, is help them explore that and then help them figure out, if they have an interest in that, where they can go to get that training and or those stackable credentials, however they want to process that.
Yeah, and you bring up another point there, the learning that goes on. I noticed you guys use the WIN system for some of the soft skills training.
Mhm.
Can you
Yes, sir.
talk to that for just a bit, JC, about how you guys use that, or one of your team members? I know your organization is very big. You've got a lot going on, so I don't expect you to know everything, but you're a smart guy too. You know a lot of stuff. So
Hey, so we have a lot of smart people working here, and I'm
yeah,
included in that number. But the WIN system is just one of the systems that we use, and it's somewhat of a quasi self-paced thing, but we try to shepherd the learners, but through that process as much as possible, because there is somewhat of a level of anxiety with trying to learn and do things specifically online. I think sometimes we get lulled into thinking that just because the mass majority of folks have a cell phone, that they are fluent so digitally, and that's absolutely not the case. So what we try to do is we try to take these opportunities to help them gain greater levels of fluency in the virtual space. And then we try to use the tool for exactly what it's set up for. So WIN is just, one of the, applications that we use, or that is accessible to the learners that come through the adult education process. We keep pretty close track from a technological usage standpoint as to how the learners are using these products. WIN, I am going to say, is not at the top, just being candid, but it's not at the bottom. And we're trying to socialize it, but just a little bit more to be able to use that. We have things such as Fast Forward, which is a tool that is primarily used in the jails and inside of the prison system. We use North Star. We use some language learning tools as well from a virtual, application standpoint. So all of these things but come into play, and they serve as supplemental tools to the instructional process. Because, but so once again, we are speaking in terms of working age learners, people with responsibilities, with families, with priorities, and we have to, from a flexibility standpoint, give them as many tools as possible to be able to do things outside of the normal business hours. So
right.
they can maximize their time. So that's one of the things that we try to be very intentional with, and that is one of the ways that we try to employ these applications and these tools.
All right. Thank you. That's that's a great overview of what you guys are doing, what you're trying to accomplish. And I think we've gotten a perspective on how, on the post-secondary side, we need to engage with you all more to create those relationships, so that as that handoff happens, that it's a warm handoff, and knowing that though you might hand them off, you're going to stay engaged with them. Okay. And
Oh,
that,
absolutely.
yep, into employment as they reskill, upskill. So we are all working toward this same effort. I've learned a tremendous amount in looking into your organization. Now, for what we do on these webinars, we hold these adult learner community of practice discussions just about monthly. And we go into a time where we're going to group and share with one another our thoughts, how we might be able to use that. I've got some questions that I always pose to the group to say, what do you think here? So I'm going to go back and do the screen share and move on to to that next slide. But before we get to that, something that I would also like to do is to encourage everyone to go out to the Impact Exchange. JC, for your team, the Impact Exchange is a place where we can share information. So I'm going to invite you guys to look at this also, because for your presentation, I would like to ask our group to pose questions or identify practices that they're already using at their institutions and how they see that they might be able to engage even further with what you guys are doing. But when it comes to the group breakouts, the questions are, based off what you heard today, how can this work with your institution? And JC, if you and your team would stay with us, I'd like to drop a couple of you guys into these discussions to maybe get some other questions and see how that works. Another comment would be, how difficult would it be to implement or to engage with you all at their institution to provide these solutions, and how can your students benefit? So take a few minutes. We don't have 15 minutes. We're going to put this at about 10 minutes and just discuss in your group how this might apply. And the groups are done randomly, but I will pose these same questions out there so that you can see that as a group.